The wind whistled across the open plains, carrying snowflakes that danced and twisted in the early winter air. Alina, the widow, stood near the edge of her small cabin, her hands gripping the wooden handle of her broom as she swept away the thin layer of snow that had settled overnight. Life had been hard since her husband passed away the previous spring. Alone, with no children and no family nearby, she had struggled to maintain her small home and the little farm she inherited. Her cabin was modest but sturdy, built from rough cut logs and topped with a slanted roof to let the snow slide off. A small patch of land surrounded it, fenced loosely to keep in the chickens she had managed to save. Beyond that, the forest began, dark and quiet, hiding the wildlife that could be dangerous if it ventured too close. Alina had always been careful, but the winter brought new challenges. She had to keep firewood stacked high, repair leaks in the roof, make sure the animals had enough to eat. Every morning, Alina rose before dawn. The world was cold and still, and the first rays of sunlight rarely warmed the air. She would start the fire, fetch water from the well, and begin her daily chores. It was tiring, and there were days when she felt her strength might not be enough to keep going. She could not afford to slow down. She had no one else to rely on. As she worked, she sometimes thought about the life she had before. Her husband, Samuel, had been strong and kind, and together they had dreamed of raising children, of planting more crops, of building a home that could last for generations. But fate had taken him away, leaving her with memories, a lonely heart, and the relentless responsibility of survival. The thought often brought tears to her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. There was no time to cry. She had to keep moving. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of blue, Alina noticed something unusual. Near the edge of the forest, she saw a figure struggling through the snow. The person was tall, wearing furs that were now soaked and heavy, and seemed to be moving with difficulty. At first, Alina thought it might be an animal, perhaps a deer or a stray wolf, but as the figure drew closer, she realized it was a man and he was in trouble. Without hesitation, Alina grabbed a thick cloak and ran toward him. She had no idea who he was or what had happened, but she could not leave someone to freeze in the harsh winter air. As she approached, she saw the man collapse, his face pale and his breathing shallow. He was clearly injured. Panic rose in her chest, but she swallowed it down. She had to act. Using all her strength, Alina helped the man to his feet and guided him toward the cabin. It was difficult. He was heavy, and the snow made every step slippery. By the time they reached the door, both of them were exhausted, and Alina's hands were red and raw from the cold. She pushed the door open and ushered him inside, closing it quickly to keep out the biting wind. The cabin smelled of firewood and dried herbs, a comforting aroma that contrasted sharply with the cold outside. Alina placed the man on a chair near the fire and began removing the wet furs from his shoulders. She set a pot of water on the fire to heat, intending to help warm him, and quickly fetched blankets. "Who are you?" she asked gently, her voice barely above a whisper. The man opened his eyes slowly, revealing dark, weary eyes that seemed full of pain and worry. "I am Koa," he said, his voice low but steady. "I was attacked." Alina nodded, understanding that he had been through something serious. "You are safe now," she said. "I will take care of you." Over the next hours, she tended to him carefully, cleaning small cuts, wrapping his wrists and ankles, and giving him warm broth. He remained quiet, only nodding occasionally, but Alina could see the gratitude in his eyes. She had never met anyone like him at all. Powerful man who now looked fragile and human in the glow of her fire. As the evening deepened, the wind outside became stronger, howling like a living creature through the trees. The snow piled higher against the cabin walls, and Alina knew that leaving Koa outside would have meant certain death. Yet here he was, sitting near her fire, safe and slowly regaining warmth. "You must be very cold," Alina said, wrapping an extra blanket around his shoulders. "I am," he admitted, his voice barely audible. "Thank you for helping me." "You would have done the same for anyone," Alina replied softly. "No one should be left out in the cold." Koa looked at her for a long moment. There was a quiet strength in her, a determination that came not from muscles but from heart. He seemed to study her, as if realizing for the first time that some people carried more courage in their spirit than others did in their arms. As the night wore on, Alina lit more candles and added more wood to the fire. She asked him questions, gently learning that he was a traveler, a man from the Apache tribe, journeying across the plains when he was attacked by unknown men. He had been hurt badly, but he had survived through sheer will. Alina listened, fascinated. Though she was careful not to pry too much, she felt a connection forming, one built on shared struggle and the quiet understanding that life could be cruel and, yet kindness still existed. By morning, Koa's strength had returned slightly. He could sit upright without support, though he was still weak. Alina brought him a simple breakfast oatmeal and a small piece of bread. He ate slowly, savoring each bite, and she felt a small smile tug at her lips. "You must rest today," she said firmly. "You are not fully recovered, and the winter is not forgiving." Koa nodded, looking out the window at the snow-covered world. "I will," he said. "I have been alone for too long. I forgot what it is like to have someone care." Alina felt a pang in her chest. She understood all too well the meaning of being alone, of facing the harshness of life without anyone by her side. But seeing him here, alive and slowly regaining strength, gave her hope too. Perhaps the world could be kinder than she had believed. The days that followed became a routine. Lena cared for Coa, bringing him food and blankets, tending to his wounds, and making the cabin a place of warmth and safety. Koa helped where he could, chopping extra wood and repairing broken fences, though he still moved cautiously. Slowly, a quiet companionship grew between them, built on mutual respect and the understanding that they had saved each other in different ways, he by surviving, she by offering her kindness without hesitation. One evening, as the wind howled and snow drifted high against the cabin, Koa turned to Alina. "I will leave soon," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I must continue my journey, to fulfill a duty I cannot abandon." Lena felt a small weight in her chest. She had grown used to his presence, to the quiet comfort of having someone else near in the long nights. But she nodded, understanding. "I will help you as much as I can before you leave," she said. He studied her for a moment, then spoke again, softly. "I return before winter. I will help you prepare for the cold. Should not face it alone." Alina looked at him, feeling both hope and uncertainty. "And if you do not return?" she asked quietly. "Then you will have learned you are stronger than you realize," Koa said, giving her a small, reassuring smile. That night, as the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall, Alina realized that her life, which had once seemed empty and lonely, had begun to change. The presence of Koa, the stranger she had helped, had brought warmth and light into her small cabin. She did not yet know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt the quiet hope that she could survive the winter and perhaps even find a new kind of family, born of trust, care, and unexpected companionship. Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin, the warmth of the fire mirrored the warmth growing quietly in Elena's heart. And in the silence of the winter night, two people who had once been strangers found comfort in each other's presence, unaware of the ways their lives would soon be bound together in ways neither of them could have imagined. The early snow had come faster than anyone in the small frontier town expected, covered the land in white sheets and made the air sharp enough to sting the skin. Alina, the lonely widow living on the edge of the settlement, watched the sky every day with worry in her heart. She had survived the last winter alone, but it had been difficult, and this year was already shaping up to be harder. Her food stores were low, her firewood stacked thin, and the cold nights were growing longer. Still, she tried her best to stay hopeful. She worked from morning to sunset, sweeping snow from her roof, repairing fence posts that cracked under the frost, feeding her remaining chickens, and carrying buckets of water before the river froze completely. Each night she sat alone near the small fire, wishing she had someone to talk to, someone to share the quiet with. She tried not to think about Koath at all, Apache warrior she had helped weeks earlier, but she often found her thoughts drifting back to him. She wondered where he was, if he had reached the safe camp he spoke about, and if he remembered his promise. He had said he would return before winter, but Alina told herself not to hope for anything. Wishes rarely came true for people like her. On one especially cold night, the wind howled around her home like a pack of wolves. Snow piled against her door, and the trees creaked under the weight of ice. Alina wrapped herself in a thick blanket and prayed the roof would hold. She was halfway to falling asleep when she heard a sound 3 firm knocks at her door. Her heart jumped. Visitors never came this late. She hesitated, holding her lantern tightly, and moved to the door. When she opened it, a rush of cold air hit her face. Standing in the doorway, covered in snow, breathing heavily, was Koa. But he was not alone. In his arms, wrapped in layers of cloth, was a small boy with round cheeks and frightened eyes. For a moment, Alina could not speak. She stepped aside and motioned for them to come in. Koa entered quietly, closing the door behind him to keep the cold away. Alina hurried to warm the fire, adding more wood until the flames glowed brighter. Only then did she turn back to him. "You came back," she whispered. Koa nodded, placing the child gently near the fire. "I gave my word." Alina knelt beside the child. He looked weak, trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. She smiled softly at him, offering her hand. "What is his name?" Koa answered. His voice carried both sadness and protectiveness. He has no home left." Alina looked up at him, her face full of concern. "What happened to the settlement?" "It burned," Koa said simply. "Not by my people. Not by his people either. It was an accident, a terrible one, and those who lived there did not survive." Alina felt her heart twist. The boy had lost everything. "And you came to me?" she asked quietly. "I had to choose a safe place for him," Koa replied. "You helped me when you did not know me? You cared for a stranger? I believed you would care for him too?" Alina stared at Tomi again. His eyes were big and dark, filled with fear and confusion. She knew that feeling. She had felt the same after losing her husband, lost, empty, unsure of the future. Gently, she pulled a blanket around him more tightly. "He can stay here," she said. "At least for now, until you find a place." Koa let out a breath he had been holding. "Thank you." Over the next days, life inside the small cabin changed completely. Alina learned that caring for a child was both tiring and joyful. Tomi was quiet at first, rarely speaking, but he watched everything with alert eyes. Alina prepared warm meals, helped him wash, and showed him simple chores like folding blankets and feeding the chickens. The boy slowly began to relax, especially when he saw Elena's steady kindness. Koa stayed too, helping wherever he could. He chopped wood in large piles, repaired the broken roof, and built a stronger fence to keep wild animals away. His presence filled the house with a sense of safety and strength Alina had not felt for a long time. Sometimes when she watched him from the window, she wondered how a man with such power could also move with such gentleness. He never raised his voice, never spoke harshly, and always treated Tomi with patience. One evening, after Tomi had fallen, asleep near the fire, Alina and Koa sat quietly at the wooden table. The flames reflected in Koa's dark eyes. "He trusts you," Koa said softly. Alina looked surprised. "Tomi? He barely speaks." "He learns by watching," Koa replied. "He sees that you are not harsh, that you do not push him away, that you make him feel safe." Alina smiled faintly. "I only do what anyone would do. Not everyone," Koa said. "Many people turn away those who need help. You did not." The room fell silent in a warm, peaceful way. Then, in a gentle tone that surprised her, Koa added, "By winter, my son will grow inside you." Elena's eyes widened slightly, and Koa quickly explained, seeing her confusion. "I do not speak of blood," he said. I speak of the heart. Tomi has already begun to see you as someone he can trust, someone he can love, someone who can be a mother again." Alina looked toward the sleeping boy. The small body rose and fell in soft breaths. For the first time in a long while, she felt a strange warmth inside, something like hope. "But what about you?" she asked quietly. "Will you take him away once spring comes?" Koa did not answer immediately. Instead, he stared into the fire, his face thoughtful. "I do not know the path yet," he said finally. But I know this, he needs a home. A real home. One where he is not alone. Alina nodded. Understand. The coming days brought challenges. The storms grew stronger, and the snow piled higher. Koa had to leave early in the mornings to gather wood from farther away, sometimes disappearing for hours. Alina worried until he returned, his shoulders covered in snow, his hands red from the cold. Inside the house, Tomi began to follow Alina everywhere like a small shadow. If she went to the kitchen, he stayed close. When she swept the floor, he copied her with a tiny broom Koa made from leftover branches. If Alina sat down, Tomi would sit beside her, leaning against her side. It was clear he felt safest near her. One night, heavy winds shook the walls and ice cracked like thunder. Tomi startled awake, crying quietly. Alina hugged him close, rocking him gently until he calmed down. When she looked up, she saw Koa watching them from across the room. Something soft and grateful shone in his expression. Another morning, Koa returned from gathering wood with a worried look. Elk tracks surrounded the home, and wolves had been spotted farther down the forest trail. He spent the entire day reinforcing the fence and sharpening tools for protection, not for attack, but to keep the animals away. Alina realized then how much he was doing for them, how carefully he tried to keep them safe. One afternoon, snow fell softly outside, turning the world white again. Tomi sat on the floor drawing shapes in the dust. Alina stirred a warm pot of soup on the stove. Koa sat by the fire, polishing the wooden tools he had carved. It felt like a small family. No one said it out loud, but the feeling was there. Later, when Tomi fell asleep early after playing in the snow, Alina and Koa stepped outside for a moment. The air was cold, but the sky was full of stars. Koa stood silently, his breath forming clouds in the night air. "Do you regret coming here?" Alina asked suddenly. Koa shook his head. "No, I made the right choice." Alina looked confused. "Right choice?" "Yes," Koa said after a pause. "I brought Tomi to the person he needed. He needed kindness, patience, warmth. He needed you." Alina felt her chest grow tight with emotion. "You make it sound like I am something special," she said softly. Koa turned his head toward her. "You are." The simple words warmed her more than the thick coat she wore. Inside the house, the fire crackled softly, and Tomi slept peacefully. And in that quiet night, Alina realized her life was slowly changing. The loneliness that had weighed on her heart for so long was fading. The small house that once felt empty now held the soft breath of a child, the steady footsteps of a strong protector, and the comforting warmth of company she never expected. Winter was still coming, and challenges were still ahead. But for the first time in years, Alina did not fear it. She was no longer alone. Tomi had begun to trust her like a mother. And Koa had become something she could not yet name, but deeply valued. Their bond had only begun, shaped by snowstorms, quiet nights, shared struggles, and the growing warmth. Inside their fragile home, the real test of their new family would come when winter reached its full strength. The snow fell heavier than ever that winter. The small cabin stood quietly amid the vast white wilderness, its wooden walls creaking under the weight of ice and snow. Inside, the fire burned steadily, casting warm light on Alina, Koa, and the little boy. Tomi. Life had changed for them all, and yet, the cold world outside reminded them that survival was still not guaranteed. Alina moved through the cabin with purpose. She had learned to be more efficient with her work, feeding the chickens in the early morning, preparing hot meals, chopping wood, and patching up leaks before the storms made them worse. Tomi followed her closely, carrying small bundles of kindling or holding her hand when he was unsure of the slippery floors. Every day, she watched him grow stronger, more confident, and more trusting of her KOA. Meanwhile, spent long hours outside. The snow made every step difficult, and the wind cut like a blade, but he did not complain. He cleared paths, chopped extra wood for the winter, and repaired the fence repeatedly to keep wolves and wild animals away. Despite the cold, he always returned to the cabin with a quiet smile, bringing small gifts for Tomi, a carved wooden toy, a bundle of berries, or a fresh rabbit he had hunted. One evening, as the wind howled outside and snow pelted the roof, Alina sat with Koa near the fire. Tomi was asleep, wrapped in a thick blanket by the warm hearth. Alina held a mug of warm tea, letting the steam rise to her face. The silence between them was comforting rather than uncomfortable. I never imagined winter could feel this. Different, Alina said softly. I thought I would be alone, and yet here we are, Koa nodded. It is different for all of us. You have given Tomi a home. You have given him hope. You have given me something I did not know I needed. Alina looked at him, seeing the gentle strength in his eyes. She realized that Koa's presence had changed everything. He had not only protected them physically, but had brought warmth and courage into their home, simply by being there. The days that followed were difficult, yet full of small joys. Snowstorms raged outside, and often they were trapped inside the cabin for days at a time. But inside, the three of them found a rhythm. Mornings were spent tending to chores, afternoons in small lessons, Alina teaching Tomi to read simple words from a worn book, Koa showing him how to carve small sticks safely. Evenings were filled with quiet stories by the fire, where Alina would recount her childhood memories. Koa would share stories from his tribe, and Tomi would listen with wide, curious eyes. One particularly cold morning, the snow was knee-deep, and the wind howled like a living creature. Koa noticed tracks in the snow wolves searching for food. He motioned for Alina to stay inside, while he went to reinforce the fence and set small barriers around the cabin. Tomi insisted on coming, and Alina allowed him to watch from the window, clutching his small hands to the glass. She saw Koa move with deliberate care, every action precise and full of intention. The wolf tracks stopped at the edge of the fence, unable to cross the barriers Koa had built. For the first time that morning, Alina allowed herself a deep breath of relief. That evening, after the storm had passed, Koa returned to the cabin, tired but smiling. Tomi ran to him, hugging his legs, and Alina's heart warmed at the sight. She realized that the little boy now saw Koa not just as a protector, but as part of his new family, and she felt the same. The man who had once been a stranger, carrying pain and mystery in his eyes, had become someone indispensable to her life. As the nights grew longer and the cold more biting, Alina began to reflect on the past months. She remembered how alone she had felt, how heavy her burdens had been, and how hopeless life had seemed. Now, in the warmth of their shared cabin, she could feel something new: connection, belonging, and the beginnings of love. Not the kind that she had lost, but a different kind, a family built by choice, trust, and care. One night, after Tomi had fallen asleep, Alina and Koa stepped outside for a moment, wrapped in thick blankets. The sky was clear, and the stars sparkled above like tiny lanterns. The snow on the ground reflected the starlight, creating a world of pure white that stretched in every direction. Koa stood silently, watching the snow, and Alina felt the courage to speak. "Do you think he will be safe here? That the storms won't take him away from us?" Koa turned to her, his face calm and certain. "He will be safe. As long as we are here, he has a home. He has us. That is what matters." Alina nodded. The words felt true deep in her heart. She thought of the little boy sleeping soundly inside and the gentle giant who had brought him to her. Their presence had filled the void that had haunted her for so long. And she knew now that the loneliness she had carried had ended, not because the world had changed, but because they had found each other. The following days were filled with small, meaningful moments. Koa and Alina worked together to stockpile food, and Tomi learned to help in small ways. He would fetch firewood, bring water from the well, or carry bundles of dried herbs. The boys' laughter began to fill the cabin, a sound that had been missing for far too long. Alina found herself smiling more, her spirit lighter with each passing day. Even Koa, who often remained quiet and reserved, allowed himself small moments of warmth, watching the boy play, helping Alina in the kitchen, or telling stories from his childhood that made them all laugh. One evening, as the fire crackled and the wind moaned outside, Alina finally spoke the words that had been on her mind for weeks. "Koa, I don't know how to say this, but you've changed everything for me. I thought I would never feel safe again, never feel happy again. And now, I do." Koa looked at her, the firelight reflecting in his dark eyes. He placed a hand gently on hers. "You have changed everything for me too," he said quietly. "I came here to deliver a boy to safety, and instead, I found something I had lost long ago. Trust, hope, and a place I can call home." Elena's eyes filled with tears, but they were not sad. They were tears of relief, of joy, and of newfound love that was not hurried or forced, but grown naturally through shared hardship, care, and understanding. Tomi's presence had softened their hearts in ways they had not expected. The three of them, once strangers in a cold world, had become a true family. As winter continued, the snow deepened, but inside the cabin, warmth and light abounded. They shared meals, laughter, stories, and quiet moments of reflection. Koa taught Tomi the ways of his people, the respect for nature, the skills of survival, and the values of courage and kindness. Alina nurtured the boy with gentle hands and a patient heart, showing him the love and care that every child deserved. And through it all, their bond grew stronger, unbreakable in its simplicity and truth. When the first signs of spring appeared, a slight thaw in the river, the buds of new life peeking through the snow, Alina realized how much they had survived together. Winter had tested them in every way: the cold, the storms, the isolation, and the fear. Yet they had endured, not alone, but together. Koa had kept them safe. Alina had provided love and care. And Tomi had brought laughter and innocence to their home. The snowy season had ended, but the warmth they had built within the cabin would last a lifetime. Alina looked at Koa and the boy, feeling a depth of gratitude she had never known before. The lonely widow she had once been had transformed into a mother, a protector, and a part of a family that was chosen. Not given by fate alone, Koa knelt beside Tomi one evening as the boy played with a small wooden toy. "Do you know why you are safe here?" he asked. Tomi shook his head. "Because of you and Alina?" he guessed. "Yes," Koa said, smiling. "And because you have a family who loves you, a family that will never leave you, no matter how harsh the winter, no matter how cold the world becomes." Tears welled up in Elena's eyes as she listened. The simple words captured everything she had felt but could not say the bond of care, trust, and love that had formed in the harshest of seasons. She placed her hand on Koa's shoulder and felt the unspoken understanding pass between them. Together, they looked out at the snow-covered world, knowing that challenges would come again, but confident that they could face anything as a family. And in that moment, the cabin felt like more than a shelter. It was a home filled with warmth, hope, and the enduring promise that no one had to face life alone. Winter had arrived with harshness, but it had also brought a miracle, a family born of compassion, courage, and choice. The lonely widow, the giant Apache, and the small boy had discovered the greatest gift of all: not wealth, not power, not comfort, but love, trust, and the quiet joy of belonging. And as the snow continued to fall softly around them, Alina realized with a full heart that life, even in its coldest, harshest moments, could bring the warmth of home, the strength of family, and the hope that every new day held.